Thanks, yes, so 7 minutes, 7 points. The first is very straightforward. All this concern about drugs is important, but let's not forget that the biggest killers in this country are tobacco, killing 80,000 a year, alcohol killing 22,000 a year, with opiates at about 1,200. So we need to keep the focus broad. Just getting hysterical about one or two new psychoactive substances is not helping the debate. In fact, it may actually confuse some of the media who really have quite a strong desire to forget the burden of alcohol particularly. And alcohol now is the leading cause of death in men between the ages of 16 and 50 in this country. And it will be the leading cause of death in women fairly soon if women carry on drinking at the rate that they're drinking now. And that, to my mind, is the pressing drug issue. It's not to do with cannabis, but even heroin thousands into
most people know my
compared with the burden of alcohol.
choose what's needed.
The third thing I want to say is that we have had remarkable examples in the last 30 years of how to do it wrong. Almost everything we have done has led to greater problems. In 1971, when the Misuse of Drugs Act was brought in, there were 1,000 heroin addicts in Britain. It was decided then that treating them as patients was wrong. It was feeding a lifestyle choice. So the ability for doctors to prescribe heroin was removed. And what did that do? That just made the market grow because they had to serve themselves. They could find their own heroin. They did that by becoming dealers. Each heroin addict needs about 25 other addicts to provide enough income to feed their habits. And we went from 1,000 addicts in 1971 to 200,000 addicts in 1990, one of the greatest, most successful growth of any industry in the history of the world. However, we didn't learn that lesson. We decided we were going to ban cannabis, and worse than that, become very active in trying to stop people using cannabis. We criminalised 1 million young people in this country and created an underclass, largely young black people in London, who now have very limited occupational opportunities because of their criminal records. Outrageous, but worse than that, we drove, therefore, the market in skunk, which is now 80% of the market because we became quite effective at reducing importations of hash from places like Morocco. So skunk, as some of you will have seen the Channel 4 program last week, how many did you see? 1.8 million other of you did. Skunk is more dangerous and has more effects on the brain, and therefore it's something we should be concerned about. But beyond that, anyone who says, well, let's deal with skunk by really clamping down on skunk production has to face the problem of spice. Now, spice is a range of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, of possible synthetic cannabinoids, which can be made in structures which have never yet been invented, and which we now know is causing havoc in our prisons. Because I don't think anyone in Britain has ever managed to be prosecuted for selling spice, because the drugs are so potent and the number of compounds are so enormous that the forensic science system doesn't even have the capacity to measure any of them. So now we have prisons full of people using these very strong synthetic cannabinoids. Some estimates say in open prisons up to 75% of prisoners are using it. We didn't have spice, and countries that don't have very restrictive policies on cannabis, like the Netherlands, don't have spice. We have spice because it's a way of getting around the drug laws. And so prohibition of cannabis has actually driven us into much, much more dangerous drugs. The same with MDMA. The prohibition of MDMA and this prohibition of the precursor of MDMA, particularly saffron, has led to the massive rise in deaths from PMA and PMMA in this country. More people die of PMA and PMMA than die of ecstasy. This drug didn't exist when ecstasy was easily available. It exists simply because the drug prohibition laws have created another opportunity to make a substance which is like MDMA but more toxic. So the perverse consequences of the laws must be taken account of. You cannot think there's a simple solution. The solutions up till now of prohibition have led to greater social harms. And we also, I'm very sympathetic to the idea of recovery, but I want to make you all aware of the fact that the abstinence-based recovery program will lead to more deaths. Heroin deaths are rising. Now, that may be because methadone deaths are falling, but there is no net reduction in the total number of opioid deaths. It's still about 1,200 a year and has been the same for a long time. And to my mind, deaths are the hardest outcome. And a policy that focuses simply on reducing use, but does not take account of deaths, is actually missing really the key element in what a drug policy should be. Legal highs. Well, yes, you can get a legal high a week. Most of the drugs which are called legal highs aren't legal. most of the writing, even by the government's own experts on legal highs, conflates drugs which are old drugs and are illegal with new drugs. And that does no one any good at all. If we really care about understanding the issue of legal highs, well, we should at least know which are legal and which aren't. And the majority of new legal highs have hardly been tested anywhere, but most of them probably aren't as harmful as some of the media would like them to be. But many of the other ones, like PMA, are pretty toxic, so it would be very useful if people could know what they were taking. And we've got examples of drug testing facilities, for instance, in the Netherlands, which have been running for 15 years, have reduced to almost zero accidental deaths from legal highs. In fact, they warned us before the Superman pill deaths in Britain over Christmas. The Dutch warned us that this new pill full of PMA was available and we should do something about it. We decided we didn't have a way of educating our people, so we didn't put it into the press, and we had 3 deaths. So there are proven policies to deal with the issue of legal highs if we care enough about them. And then the final point I want to make, and this is the one that really exercises me at present, because it's become very clear in my thinking about the way the UN conventions have actually affected the world in the last 50 years, is that one of the most deleterious effects has been on research and medical innovation. And I've written several papers about this, and I've given Lynn here a paper, and I've given Vaz a recent paper on this. The UN conventions are the worst censorship of research in the history of the world. They have almost at a stroke stopped research in cannabinoids for medicine, in psychedelics for medicine, in drugs like MDMA for medicine. In fact, almost all the drugs that we have discussed were medicines and potentially should be medicines. But the UN conventions make it almost impossible to research these compounds. And that's been an enormous detriment to patients in this country and worldwide. And we see the obvious benefits of cannabis in many patients, but the hidden benefits that could emerge from a proper study of all these drugs, I mean, will never be discovered unless we do something sensible about the conventions and about the way we interpret them in this country. And we have this ability. The Home Secretary tomorrow could simply say, or maybe this afternoon, she could say cannabis is no longer a Schedule 1 drug, it's a Schedule 2 drug. Yeah. That is a decision that she can make.
We vote on
it. As a doctor, I find it very strange that the leading person in drug regulation should be making decisions about medicines. Shouldn't doctors make decisions? Shouldn't doctors make decisions about medicines? No, we're one of the very few countries in the world which give authority to the equivalent of the Home Office to tell us as doctors and patients what a medicine is. And that is ridiculous. In fact, it's outrageous. And that could be stopped overnight. So can I recommend that? Thank you.